Thank you so much, Dawn. That was phenomenal. I think everybody out in wherever they are in their homes really would have appreciated that. Again, it's great to end on that note of optimism. And I'm very happy to be in a position to invite two people to join us for this fireside chat. As I mentioned earlier when I was introducing Dawn, if you'd like to submit a question to the fireside chat, feel free to do so. There is a chat window on the webcast. I already have a couple of questions from some of the people that have been viewing at home. But first, I'm going to introduce our two panelists that are joining Dawn and I. First up is Dr. Johnathan Gough, the lead data scientist for Converge Technology Solutions. Johnathan, hi. You look great, by the way.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Emily. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for that talk as well.
All right. So I'd also like to welcome Alan Clingerman, Chief Technology Strategist from Dell Technologies. Alan, over to you. And I think you're going to ask our first question.
Absolutely. Thanks, Emily. And Don, I got to say, I want to echo the same comment and sentiment that you left on. I want to make this a very optimistic view of the future. And I clearly have the same vision as Michael and our leadership does about what we're trying to accomplish with what we refer to as the fourth industrial revolution. And I think it goes right hand in hand with what you've called the second era of the digital age. I don't want to age myself, but I used to work on some of the technology that you referred to, the IBM mainframe and COBOL. I used to be an old COBOL programmer. So I've had an opportunity to see a lot of this change over the time, right? An era, and see how it's really technologies infuse itself into our everyday lives. And I loved your kind of commentary around technology and what it does even within the home. I thought it was funny what you said there in sensors, because yes, technology's embedded itself in everything, and I live that same life. I have a Ring doorbell. I have an ADT surveillance system tied to it, tied to a set of Hue light bulbs, right, to control and create better ambiance throughout the evening. A Nest thermostat, right, so that as I leave and come and go from my facility, I can keep my energy costs low and be more green and provide a better temperature when I come back, especially since I live in the South in Florida, hot sometimes, right? I want to make sure I come back to a cool home, and certainly just timing things. Think about the rain sprinkler timer that we used to have that was very manual in nature. It's just interesting to see how all of these have started to interconnect themselves. And I would hope at some point in time, as those technologies mature, that they start using blockchain technology, right, to talk amongst themselves to what you described earlier, right? So that there's a series of trust, because right now I'm not sure, even though I have all these devices, I'm not sure I trust any of them, to be frank. And we look at it at Dell Technologies in kind of three ways. In most technologies we embrace, and blockchain is one of them. One is about blockchain for Dell. So that's how are we using blockchain solutions for optimizing our internal processes, whether it's internal facing only to optimize things for our customers, because it's always what it's about at Dell, or even things like making it externally available. Like you mentioned, certainly everybody knows the Bitcoin analogy, even if they don't know a lot about blockchain. I mean, we were actually one of the first commercial entities in 2014 on the Dell.com website to accept Bitcoin for a Dell purchase. So, lots of interesting things happening. And when you brought up the supply chain, that hit home, because if you look at how Michael built, Dell Technologies, it was all built on a just-in-time supply chain. Well, what do you think we've done? We actually already are using blockchain technologies with all of our partners that you guys know, right? We build a recipe for all these large compute elements that we stuff in the data center. And we need to have some safe and trusted communication to those partners, right? We're eating our own dog food, right? Or drinking our own wine. That might be a better analogy. And then we look at blockchain in Dell, right? Of how do we embed it in specific Dell products that we bring to market to make it a safer and secure environment for our customers, right? So think about it of even similar services that you're using today for phone home. If you're using any Dell technology, whether it's a PowerEdge server or any of our fantastic storage products, they phone home, right? So that we understand from a service perspective what's happening. I want to make sure that we create a good, trusted environment. We're using blockchain technology to get that accomplished. And then finally, the last one, and this is what leads to my question to Don, is we're looking, one of the things that I do is how do we take all these fantastic solutions that we bring to market and package it as such that it's more commercially available. We can take, technologies like blockchain, like artificial intelligence, package them as solutions that they're more mainstream and we can bring them downstream in market. As Michael Dell, you probably have heard this before, it's about democratizing IT. So there's lots of barriers to entry to the space, right? How do we make it more mainstream in nature? And that's the whole concept of blockchain on Dell. So Don, my question is, while blockchain's obviously a very proven technology, it's fantastic. We're using it, right? Again, back to drinking our own wine. What I find in talking to our leaders, right, at all of our customers, is they find it's very difficult for their organization to understand all the transformative implications that it brings to them, right? They start to lock up because they don't know where to start. And clearly we all know, and you just covered a lot of them, they're business, ethical, and technical requirements that are still arcane, right, to many within the leadership even. And while democratization and open source frameworks are great, they do create some barriers to entry, back to my point, right? They elevate it because it's hard to find adequately skilled resources to help make this real, right, for the company. I just throw this out there. What have you seen successful of how does an organization get started, and is there an easier way to find those with adequate skills, to help me take those next steps?
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a lot of great stuff. First of all, you mentioned Michael Dell. I've known him for a long time, and we've collaborated on and off, and there's some good stories there, probably more appropriate for the bar. But the fourth industrial age is exactly the same thing that I'm talking about. The first was steam, and we mechanized devices like hoes and shovels and so on. The second was electricity, and that enabled the industrial production line. That was a really big thing that happened there. And then you had these two eras of digital. The first, or the third in the case of the other nomenclature, was mainframes and minis and all that stuff that I talked about, PCs and the internet. And the fourth is exactly this. And also, I think that your four foci for Dell are exactly right. I mean, that's exactly what you need to be doing. So there are a lot of elements to the question. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but part of it is that this is taking some time. And there are some reasons for that. And in the interview, I did an interview with Fred Smith, the CEO of FedEx. This is in front of a large audience, actually, thousands of people at Consensus. And he said, back in the day, you'd create a great system, chain of custody, you'd build it out, you put a Dell logo on it, you take it to market, you achieve competitive advantage. He says, today, we want to do all that. We want to transform, for starters, the entire logistics industry, but you can't do it like that. You got to change the whole industry. You need standards throughout the industry. What is a bill of lading? And that would be one of 100 things that need to get standardized. So he says, this is going to take some time, but he says, but don't confuse the fact that this is profoundly affecting a $50 trillion industry with what some people say is that, well, blockchain is really, it's not so important. The reason it's because it's so important, it's changing the corporation as we know it. It's changing the architecture of government, and this is going to take a while. How do you get started? Well, the first thing is to join the Blockchain Research Institute and hire Northern Micro to help you. No, seriously. Think big, but start small. And the very first thing, and you mentioned, is talent. We have a series of courses online. We spent almost $1 million developing these. They're delivered through INSEAD, number 1 or 2 business school in the world, on the Coursera platform, largest provider of online courses. Since the pandemic, those things have quintupled in their registration. And it's called Blockchain Revolution in the Enterprise. And that's a way of just getting people up to speed. Secondly, you need to find the elite talent within your organization, and these people exist. Third, start off with some pilots and do a POC, implement a pilot, try it out, and then roll that out. And when you do, you're going to learn about all these broader, big, tough questions. The fourth is you can't just change your company. You got to change your whole industry. Join your industry association. So FedEx, actually, we work with them in helping create what's called BITA, Blockchain and Transportation Alliance, where it's not just FedEx, all their biggest competitors. Dell is part of that as well, actually. So, and every industry has an association like that. And the final thing would be to buy my books in massive volume. This is really the way to go for it. No, seriously. So that's a quick answer to a complicated question.
That's a great answer. Thanks so much, Don. And just because we're getting close to the hour, I do want people to know that we chatted beforehand. Most of us don't have a hard stop that are on the panel. So we're going to keep going. We're going to get through the questions. And if you can stay and join us, great. If not, we'll send out a link to the recording. So over to you, Johnathan.
Sure. Thank you so much. I love the idea of democratizing everything, right? Making it easily available, there being a carrot, so to speak, for quality compliance. There's so much you can do with blockchain, and you're absolutely right. I love the idea, especially about how you can take the power out of the hands of the banks or take the power out of the hands of the intermediaries and push that down to the people who actually need it. One of the challenges, though, I have a hard time wrapping my head around is, maybe you could speak to this. What are the hurdles that need to be overcome, the biggest blockers or barriers to getting these capabilities into the hands of those people who could really benefit from it? I mean, for example, I can't remember the name of the app, but there's an app that a lot of people use to see crime in the local area, right? Everybody's taking pictures with their cell phones because, cameras have been around for a long time, right? But it wasn't until the last 20 years that we carry them in our pockets everywhere we go. So what is that thing? What do we need to get over so that we actually start carrying blockchain in our pocket, so to speak, and getting it to the people who actually need it the most?
Yeah. Great question. So there are a lot of big challenges, to say the least, and they fall in all kinds of different categories. And you alluded to one, which is technology. The technology is still relatively immature. And user interfaces are still not exactly friendly. And, the whole crypto world is still quite arcane. And unlike the internet, which is a network of similar networks that all interoperate together, we have 1,000 blockchains that don't talk to each other. Bitcoin being one of 1,000 or more. So this is kind of analogous to the early days of the internet. I don't know. I'm sure you and Alan would remember back in the mid 90s that companies said, well, we're not going to use this crazy wild internet. And there's all this porn out there and criminals and all the rest. We're going to build our own proprietary intranets. And that's what companies have been doing. But over time, these blockchains are coming together. And they're coming together in a whole bunch of ways. But one of them is that there are technologies that now are emerging that link them together. One is called Cosmos, the Internet of blockchains. Polkadot is another one. So over time, these technology problems will be overcome. And for all of the big challenges, Alex and I, when we were writing the book, we listed 10 of them, and I just mentioned one. And we said, well, we have to put these challenges in one of two buckets. Bucket number one, reasons why blockchain is a bad idea, it's not going to work, and we should just back off. Bucket number two is implementation challenges. And pretty much everything ended up in bucket number two. That doesn't mean that they're trivial, but they're significant. Now, there are other challenges too. One is the blockchain has an image problem. A lot of people view this as crypto, and it's somehow some kind of criminal activity, which is kind of understandable, in the sense that criminals are always the first to adopt exciting new technologies, from the, automobile to the flip phone. But on the other hand, it's misinformed. Like, well, Bitcoin's used by criminals. Oh, that's probably true. It is true. We estimate 1% of all Bitcoin transactions are for some kind of nefarious purpose, but 3% of all cash transactions, at least, are for some kind of nefarious purpose. So, and that, in fact, the smart law enforcement people really love Bitcoin. There's a great TEDx talk. A woman named Catherine Hahn spoke at TEDx San Francisco, at the same event where my son Alex spoke. And she was a federal prosecutor who describes how law enforcement is using Bitcoin to catch the bad guys. It's an extraordinary talk. The other big problems have to do with just the magnitude of this change. Like, just think about changing money, changing supply chains, changing the nature of democracy or governments. I mean, these are big, big fundamental challenges, and they're going to take a long time. Just to change the financial industry, as you mentioned, about intermediaries. You go into Starbucks and you tap your card, and a bunch of messages go through six or seven different companies. 3 days later, somebody gets paid. Well, as we said, if that were all on a distributed ledger, you wouldn't have those intermediaries, and the payment and the settlement's the same activity. There's no delay. It's like real time. You could have smart money, all kinds of other things. But just to bring about a change like that, you're talking about a financial industry that's hundreds of trillions of dollars, and that has systems that lock it into old models. It has a complete regulatory infrastructure in every country that has an old view of what is money, what is banking, what are the roles of all of the different players. And this is going to take a while.
I mean, do you think, though, that and can you think and reflect on how the internet changed things? Was there a tipping point in your mind with the internet where we switched from you have to have the phone call and the paper signing, things being digital?
Well, I like the analogy a lot, actually, because you think about the internet. I was using the ARPANET in the late 70s. I was at Bell Northern Research. And so that was kind of the internet. And the first app of the Internet of Information was, in fact, email. That's what we were using back then. And it never really took off until the web came out. And in particular, not just the web, but Netscape, the graphic browser. Mosaic was the private precursor to that. And that created a general purpose platform whereby you could build any application. And we've had a similar thing already that's occurred with blockchain, which is that the first app of blockchain was Bitcoin. But now we have these general purpose environments that look a lot more like the web that are out or coming out. And I mentioned Cosmos and Polkadot, but also Ethereum and others like that, where you can build any app. We just don't have the browser yet. We don't have that beautiful, easy to use kind of digital wallet where people can easily interact with all of these digital assets. But this is happening as we speak.
That makes sense.
Great answer.